Welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us here today for our seminar on equality in our church with Dr. Birgit Weiler. First of all, I want to apologize profusely to Birgit Weiler for the fact that we have got her up at 6 a.m. in the morning. The fault is mine because I didn't check the time difference between Europe and Peru. So many thanks indeed for Sister Birgit Weiler to be up at 6 a.m. in the morning to give us this talk here today. We will be recording her talk, and we will not be recording the question and answer session, and they will be made available then after our meeting. So now I'd like to pass on for our opening prayer to Anne Dobbie.
Spirit of all wisdom, as the sun breaks the bounds of the horizon, we celebrate the limitations broken by women in our world and pray for their continued empowerment. For their work in medicine, music, art, humanities, engineering, sport, research, law, business, journalism, catering, service industries, technology, politics, and academia, we honour the gifts of women throughout this world. May they continue to seek the wisdom and knowledge that comes from you. May they work with you to discover the best path for their own lives. May all people continue to work for equal pay and healthcare for women. We ask that you continue to transform our hearts so that women may be recognised as beacons of strength and courage. Bless all women, older and younger, middle-aged. Bless those who are married and those who are celibate. Bless women who are also mothers. And bless the women who don't have children, but who care faithfully for friends and neighbours. May we as a world create roads for their sacred paths, that all women may live into their calling. The possibilities of their work are endless. God of love, open the eyes of our hearts so that your light can be seen beaming through them. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Anne. And now Elsa will introduce our speaker. Elsa.
I'm happy and honored to introduce Professor Sister Birgit Weiler, whom I had the fortune of meeting in 2023 in Rome, while we both collaborated with Amerindia, a Latin American theological network, to follow and give external support to the Synodal Assembly. Birgit Weiler, like Pope Leo, comes from the global north. She was born in Germany, in Duisburg, and found a home in the global south. She has been a missionary in Peru for 35 years. She combines the highest academic preparation. She obtained a PhD in philosophy with a focus on intercultural theology and is a professor at the Department of Theology of the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru with an intense pastoral experience. She belongs to the Congregation of the Medical Missionary Sisters, is a member of the Theological Consultancy Group of CELA, the Latin American Episcopal Council, and of the Ecclesial Conference of the Amazon, SEAMA, which is an ecclesiological nullity because it brings together bishops and lay people. In 2019, she participated in the Amazon Synod and created a stir because in a press conference, she publicly called for women to vote at the Synod. She said that we need to overcome machismo and begin to confess ecological sins. Last year, Pope Francis appointed her as an advisor to the Vatican General Secretariat of the Synod, and therefore she is an authoritative voice to talk to us about the synodal process that is not yet concluded. Among her areas of research, which make her particularly interesting for us and for the topic she will talk about, equality in the Church, we find the Church in the Amazon, indigenous theologies, integral ecology, intercultural theology, feminist theologies. But it is time to let her speak, because it will be her words, much more than my presentation, that will make us understand what a wonderful resource for the Universal Church Birgit Weiler is. Thanks, Birgit. It's up to you.
Thank you very much for this very kind presentation. And first of all, thanks a whole lot to be with you. Don't worry about the hour, because it's a good start into a day to share this first beginning hours of the day with you. As you are also highly committed with synodality, as people of God working together, it is an honor to be with you, to share insights, which are not just my personal insights, which are insights which have come up, matured in sharing with colleagues, female and male in theology, but particularly with the people engaged in trying to strengthen the synodal church here in Latin America and the Caribbean. And saying this, it's also important to value, to treasure that we have had dioceses, and in the Amazon region, to which I'm very much connected, we have had vicariates, young churches, and prelatures, where a synodal process had already started quite some time before Pope Francis called for, in preparation of the synod on synodality, to have the processes of listening, consultation, discernment together, and then to have a synod which was not only composed by bishops, but where for the first time women have been present, not only contributing as it was in a limited way possible in previous synods, their thoughts, but also with the right to vote, finally. And so I believe that also from Latin America, much of what our people could bring in out of their reflected experience, what helps us to become a synodal church, could find entrance into the whole process of listening. Only one short example, or shortly presented. The Ecclesial Assembly of Latin America and the Caribbean, the first so-called ecclesial assembly worldwide, when it was done, there were also present Cardinal Mario Grech, Cardinal Hollerich, and Bishop Bo, now Cardinal Bo, and Cardinal Oswald from India, and Bo from Myanmar. They said, we are coming here to be with you in solidarity, in a synodal spirit, but also to be inspired, to learn from what you people are doing here, to see how we can apply it in our own context. So it went like this to Asia, and in the Asian conference, where the bishops together with lay people assembled, they added to the element of having an intense process of listening to each other before an assembly, to go into depth what this all meant, what people contributed during the assembly, and to really do it in a discerning spirit, but done together, ecclesial discernment. They added the beautiful fact that it was done at round tables. So you could see the setting up of the synod on synodality, the reality that for the first time we have had such a broad and long process of consultation of the people of God, started when we remember at parishes, then at diocesan level, national level, continental assemblies. And all this went into the process. Pope Francis said it was not just a preparation, it was already part of the synod on synodality. It has happened in this broad way and intense way for the first time in the history of our church. And these are steps forward where I also can see when we come together, global north, global south, inspire each other, strengthen strengthen each other in the strong conviction of that the church is called to become much more a synodal church, but then also to share practices, the steps forward we are doing, the fruits which are also coming up. Though we would sometimes desire that they would be more, but to cherish those ones which already have been grown, take care of them so that further growth can happen. I believe that is so important and vital, because Pope Francis has been very clear that when the second session of the Synod on Synodality concluded, that this did not mean the synodal process has concluded. The contrary is the case. We know it from Vatican II. The phase of the reception is very, very important, so that the seeds sown during the synod will not die, but will be watered, will be cared for, can grow and become strong plants, to use this image, which is very much used by our indigenous peoples. And that brings us to the topic of today. The question or the topic of equality in our church raises the question, and not only in the global north, but also in the global south, especially also in the Amazon region. Is there equality really of all members in the Catholic Church? And then how does this equality, if it exists and where it exists, translate into rights? I believe that the answer is yes and no. Yes, we are all equal. That is what our Christian faith confirms, as we are all created in the image of God. So there is an equal dignity of all of us, men and women, people of the different sexual orientations, of different ethnic, social backgrounds. We are equal in dignity. And that is something very important to underline, to make explicit in our times, not only within our church circles, but there comes the testimony, the witness. We are called as a synodal church, which does not circle just around herself and her inner reform processes, which are important, but equally important is to understand this process as a call to witness in the world very much fragmented, and in a world where often, again, there are made very hurting differences between people. And I'm saying this living in Peru, where we are again in this difficult and painful situation where steps made forward are now taken back in a society where racism is again becoming strong. It's here and in many other places, and where people are put into different classes according to ethnic backgrounds and social backgrounds. So synodality as living out the gospel calls for our witness within the church and within this world, that for God each person counts and we have an equal dignity. And we are all, in an equal way, members of the human family, have a place in this family, not some more and some others less. So it is a standing up against exclusion of people out of different reasons. But that also then calls for looking for coherence in our own church, if we want that our witness can be credible. Therefore, it also is important that at least the whole synodal process more broadly strengthen the awareness through baptism. We share an equal dignity of sisters and brothers of Christ living within each baptized person, and that each baptized person has received the Spirit of God. Saying this, it includes also the awareness the Spirit of God is not just bound by baptism. Spirit of God blows where she wills, is present also in other people from other religions, people who will not understand themselves as religiously committed people. But in baptized people, we receive the Spirit of Christ, and so are called to acknowledge this gift of God's Spirit, Spirit of Christ, in each other. And the gifts which Spirit is giving are for the good of the whole church. This is very important, when it comes to the question of equality. In this, we have an equal dignity as baptized people within the church, and that sometimes has been forgotten. Therefore, Pope Francis stressed so often, all of us, Pope, cardinals, bishops, priests, and all the other many members of the people of God, we all have entered through the same door into the church, the baptismal door, he said. That is the entrance which we share and the dignity we share. And that, I think, this memory needs to be strengthened. Because if we believe this means then, and implies, God's Spirit gives his gifts, his charisms to all and for the good of the whole body of the church, for the life within the church and for the life to be shared in the mission of the church with others. So this dignity means to overcome hierarchical appreciation of the different gifts, as if to be ordained or to be in religious life would mean a higher standard of Christian life, a more valuable Christian life, as lay people are living it. This urges us to overcome such an understanding which doesn't do good, it doesn't do justice, and is not in the spirit of Jesus, but to learn to appreciate God's given spirit working in each one of us, and that what each one can contribute needs to be cherished and needs to be acknowledged, and for the good of the church as a whole and her mission. And so it is to work and to learn how to connect, to see the interconnectedness of the different charisms and the interplay which can take place if we are appreciative of each other's gifts and skills and insights and wisdom for the good of the whole. What then also I think is important to say on the other side, no, we are not completely equal in the sense of being realistic and being honest. Authority in the church is not equally distributed. It's not like this. The church is not set up like this. Authority and power which goes with authority, we know, are to a very good extent, especially connected with ordained ministry. And that means as women cannot access to this ministry, mainly also then with men, and men as ordained ministers. So therefore, often the critical question has risen in different contexts. Is it possible for a hierarchically structured church, as our church is, to really become a synodal church? I believe what has happened, the synodal process shows us that there are doorways into a different way of understanding authority in the church and ordained ministry in the church, how to do it within a synodal understanding is a fundamental understanding of the church, the basic understanding of the church. This, I think, both aspects are important. The honest acknowledgement, we are a hierarchical church, but at the same time, God's Spirit has been working strongly among us that shows the whole process which took place, that became also manifest in the many contributions from the different parts of the world, Christian communities, parishes, dioceses, who put in their words in the different moments and phases of discernment and consultation in the synodal process. Before the first session, and then also between the two sessions of the synod. What becomes clear here, something which a Chilean theologian who worked very much with basic Christian communities in Chile, Ronaldo Muñoz, said already in 1972. He said, the clerical institution is one of the big structural obstacles to really discover the gospel in its value of being good news for all people. And following his thought, the theologian Rafael Luciani from Venezuela states that we are facing right now a systemic and structural problem that reveals the weakness of the whole setting, theological, cultural setting or model, which is dominant, still dominant, which has become obsolete at the same time and needs a profound reform. A process which has started with the Synod on synodality and all the processes which led to the Synod, and needs to continue now in the implementation of the Synod. Similar, the Chilean theologian Carlos Chickendance affirms that it is necessary to be aware that we are in a process of undergoing a profound reform in the church. So that doesn't mean you just overthrow the hierarchical church, as some opponents critically say, as if we would like to undo the church, but to honestly discern 4 ways how to become a synodal church which acknowledges authority of those ones who are the ones responsible for leading the church, but an authority which will be understood and practiced in a synodal spirit. Pope Francis has used different images for this. He uses sometimes the image of the inverted pyramid. There, some people critically, and I think right so, noticed, okay, it's one step to have it inverted, but still it's a pyramid. It's hierarchical. I like more the movement stressed also within a synodal church. It's a movement of secularity. And that also Pope Francis took up, making it clear that a synodal church has its starting point within the people of God. People of God take part in the processes of listening to each other, consulting, discerning. Church authorities take up fruits of the discernment processes in which they are themselves involved. We also hope to further discover how more people can participate as representatives of the people of God in the not only the making of decisions, but also the taking of decisions, without that this takes away authority to parish priests, to bishops, to the Pope himself, but that this authority will be understood in a way that leaves it clear. Spiritual authority means bishops, priests, parish priests, bishops, the Pope himself, with their authority, are participating actively in these discernment processes. So it is the same spirit blowing among us, working in us, and authority resides in facilitating a very good discerning process, in taking care of that those ones who might often be not invited to participate, who are at the margins of our parishes, of our church, of society, that their voices can be included and will be included. It also is the responsibility of those ones who have authority in the church to assure as much as they can that it is a transparent process of discernment, that we really honestly and openly try to listen together to the working of God's Spirit, and to identify where some distortions might begin to enter and to affect negatively the process. So when church authorities are involved themselves in this whole process and help the people of God to undergo well this process, then there's also something what you could call a moral authority of the result of what comes up there, because it is then not just the inspiration of some. It's what people of God as community being on the way discover as will of God, as fruits of the Spirit, and has then also its own weight. One of the canon lawyers mentioned this and said, canon law, for example, in case of the parish councils and the parish priests, foresees that normally when there has been a process of thorough discernment, the parish priest abides by the decision, which is a fruit of a consensus found. And he needs to have very serious reasons not to do this. And I think these elements, which already exist, are often not enough known and are very much important to bring again to our awareness. So I think there's a discernment going on how to understand authority in our church in a truly synodal spirit. And that makes things change. When we talk about this profound reform, that has to do as an essential piece of this profound reform. I believe also that it is a learning process, how to do this, how to connect a synodal church, a synodal spirit with the hierarchical system which is existing. And I think we have begun the way. There is much still to do to find a mode to do this in a credible and wholesome way. And I think it is important what Pope Francis stressed so often, that bishops have their place as church authority in the local churches. They are the main local authority. The same then on the smaller scale holds true for the parish priests. They do it within the church community. Therefore, Pope Francis has the beautiful image. Sometimes a bishop is called to walk behind the people, to really assure that nobody will be left aside. Sometimes the place is to be walking within the people, and sometimes leading, but leading, being very careful that you have the connection with the people of God as a brother in faith. I believe it still needs to be assumed more profoundly the deep insight of Saint Augustine, reminding that our new Pope belongs to the Augustinian order. Augustine has this beautiful sentence when he addresses the people, and he was chosen as a bishop, and he said, "With you, I'm a Christian. For you, I'm a bishop." And that is not to put one against the other, but being a Christian together with others, one is bishop or one is the highest authority in the church is Pope. And I have had the impression, strongly the impression, Pope Francis tried to live this. He explored ways how to do this. He also desired to decentralize more decisions in the church, to encourage more local churches to take on their own responsibility, to discern things which are very important for their presence, their mission, their pastoral work. And he was very honest to say, people who live in a given context know much better the realities of the peoples, and so can more effectively, more wisely discern what would be the best according to the spirit for this local church in answer to different questions coming up. These for me are hopeful signs that we are walking towards a new way of being church. It is also finally taking up with more strength the reality that we all really conform these people of God, and that in this people of God, each member counts with gifts and skills. Therefore, the final document talks about co-responsibility, a differentiated co-responsibility, but the differentiated was put in to say not all do it in the same way, but all are co-responsible according to the context in the different areas of church where they are active. And that is the next important step, because if we are co-responsible, that also requires them, together with the equality in the dignity, in the baptismal dignity as image of God, that we have the spaces for free speech, the so-called parousia, which the Spirit also gives as a gift, that you have the courage to freely bring in your word, which can be sometimes an encouraging word, but can sometimes also be a word which helps all to see where something is not going well and why, where are incoherences, where are injustices within our church, where do relationships need healing. And that holds very much true for the relationship of men and women in our church. I'm glad that it is in the final document clearly said that healing of relationship, they talk about conversion of a relationship, necessary to really become truly a synodal church, so that what in theory is recognized as equality in dignity will be acknowledged in practice. And there again, it goes together. The witness we are called to give within our church, but then also in our present world. For example, in Peru, only as one place, in theory, there is in the constitution the equal dignity of each person in Peru. In practice, this is often not so. And so I believe, therefore, when we grow, when we struggle with this to become more coherent and grow in coherence, it is also something which we contribute to the places where we are, where this often also lacks. In practice, to treat each other, recognizing each other's dignity. And that holds very true for the dignity of women, the equal dignity of women. Because in the whole synodal process, it was stressed so much from different parts of the world that this is an ideal, but that this ideal often is not lived in our church. There's also the problem in society, but depending on the different contexts, there are societies where the dignity of women, the rights of women, the spaces that women more actively can already participate in equal conditions in leadership positions, there is a society often has done more steps than the church has done. So that is also a challenge for us, because I can face it at the university with young people, they are very sensitive to this. And they want to see that in the Catholic Church, women are really accepted and treated with equal dignity, with all what this then implies in the practice. And I think there is still some way to go that, for example, women who have the gifts and skills and the knowledge and the grace of the Spirit can assume leadership positions in our church. There is still this ceiling, this glass ceiling. In theory, it is more and more affirmed. In practice, it's often the experience women are not considered in the same way, under the same conditions, the equal conditions as men. So there is a way to go. And good news is that I for sure know by friends of mine in the Diocese of Chiclayo, where our actual Pope, Leo the 14th, has been bishop before. He has promoted very much women in this awareness that women have the equal dignity and should be equally considered when it comes to responsibilities in the church and leadership positions for the good of the church and her mission. And so I'm hopeful that he will continue to do so, being a pope now. I also believe that equal dignity includes to honor the sensus fidei, this, as Pope Francis also said it, the intuition of faith, this gift which the Spirit gives to each one to perceive what is God telling us in given situations when it comes to matters of faith? That in this acknowledging the sensus fidei, this spirit, this intuition of faith of each person, of each baptized person in the church, as it is said, demands then a much more synodal process of discerning and taking into account what different people say, if they have this gift. And that if we assure that they have this gift, if this is acknowledged, then we need to set up processes which really allow much more than until now, that a decision making, preparation of decisions, takes in as much people as possible. The final document speaks about the need to see that we assure ways and procedures of participation as broad as possible. And if then it goes gradually that what many have contributed, it will be discerned by a smaller group, it needs to be made sure in the whole process that it is honored what the vast majority has put in out of their awareness of faith. It also needs to be made clear that what is called the conversion to synodality as a spiritual conversion needs structures and needs procedures to assure that what is spiritually perceived also will be put into practice. So I believe it is not helpful to separate here between spiritual conversion and like procedures and structures are of second importance. No, they are very important. If we believe in incarnation, then what is an inspiration, what we perceive as something which needs to happen in our church as part of the deep reform, as we said, needs to be embodied. And to embody it, to make it real, so that we can live it, perceive it, feel it, make it a culture in our church, structures and procedures which facilitate and foster synodality are very much needed. And because they allow that equality and dignity will then be put into practice, will be concretized in the ways how we come to make decisions. And therefore, it's helpful to keep in mind what Raphael Luciani has been stressing on several occasions, that synodality is more than a synod or a council, because synodality implies the big challenge to synodalize the whole church. And that implies the creation of structures and institutions to make this possible. It also implies then to reform together with the priests, but to reform, to look for a new understanding coherent with the synodal spirit, the understanding of priesthood. What does it mean to be a priest, an ordained minister, which holds true for the priest, which holds also true for deacons, in a synodal church? I have the experience here in Latin America that there is a great fear among especially diocesan priests to really open up to synodality, to be the ones who help in their Christian communities, parishes, at diocesan level, to foster synodality. And when we tried to do some inquiry, what is the cause of this deep-seated fear? Well, here in Peru, for example, one reason was that some people from a very conservative group spread through social media the piece of information that supposedly synodality does away with priests. They said Priests, be careful, in a synodal church, lay people will take over completely. There is no priesthood needed anymore, which of course was then a shock for many of the diocesan priests, and who often also do not have the same possibilities to access a good formation in theology and spirituality as, for example, priests in the male congregations. Normally, there are better conditions for them when it comes to formation. So we have seen here, and I would believe it holds true also for other spaces, to foster the process of becoming a synodal church where we acknowledge and appreciate our equality as people of God, that priests who already are living synodality and feel themselves be enriched in their priestly vocation, living it in synodal relationships, that they help to give testimony. I believe more than theoretical reflections, what helps first to open hearts and minds of priests who have a hard time to and struggle with fostering synodality in their respective parishes or communities. What touches them most is testimony of others, so that they can see it's not something just taking away from you. It is a way to enrich your understanding of the priesthood, to live it more truly in the spirit of Jesus, who has come to serve and not to be served, who was a brother to his brothers and sisters, who cared for living faith in a communitarian sense and spirit. Again, here I have also the hope that our now Pope Leo will continue what he did as a bishop of Chiclayo. He strengthened very much also among lay people the communitarian way of living the faith. He appreciated those ones who really assembled, as you do, in groups regularly to discern, to help each other in going forward and living out coherently the gospel. And from this sharing among each other, help also the church to grow, to overcome incoherences. And it will be also very important to overcome clericalism, because it needs deep changes in mentality and attitudes on both sides. Priests to understand how harmful clericalism is, as it is an abuse of power. Power, as understood, that is perhaps more easily made clear in Spanish. Poder is power in Spanish, but poder in Spanish is also a verb. It's what you can do, what gives you the possibility to do something creatively, to do something new. And so if power is used, as often also stressed in feminist theology, to empower others, to do something together in a powerful way in terms of bringing about changes, helping new life to come up, then it is used in the spirit of Jesus. But when power is used to subjugate, to dominate others, then it is detrimental, and it is not respecting the dignity, the equal dignity of all, and then it is harmful. Therefore, priests need, and it has to start in the seminaries, in their formation, a different way to understand authority and power, but also in order to overcome clericalism, but also, I believe, we, and as religious women, we are also lay people. We have no ordination. We together have also to help each other to overcome sometimes clerical mentalities and attitudes when we give so much power to priests. That is still a struggle, for example, here in Peru, in not few parishes, that people who are now asked to bring in their voices will answer, no, let the parish priest decide. He knows what is best. So I believe there is the chance that brings or that springs up from when you have recognized where the problem is, when you could freely talk about it, that it exists, that clericalism exists, that it affects negatively, and that we are called together to help each other to overcome it in a process of conversion, transformation. And I believe also that goes together with equal dignity, what is stressed in the final document, and it has its roots in a word of Cyprian of Carthage, the triple not without. It's a wise not without. Not without a bishop. Discern decisions, take decisions, not without a bishop, not without the word of the presbyters, but also not without the consent of the people of God, that they are consulted. So if we are respectful of this triple not without, not to exclude each other, then I believe we are taking important steps forward towards a truly synodal church, which is then also more dignifying for all of us in our different vocations. And the other beautiful image, and I was reminded yesterday by the wife of Colm, it's the polyedron, which Pope Francis also has put up as an image for a synodal church. I appreciate it very much because the polyedron shows different facets, multiple diverse facets, can be very colorful diverse facets, but there is no up and down. There is only a connected, wholesome body, which is different, has different aspects, which make up its beauty, its unity in diversity, its harmony in diversity. And when you take away some of the pieces, then something is really lacking there. It impoverishes the polyedron. And so I believe equality in dignity calls us also to help the church to grow into this way of being a church like the polyedron, to reflect that there is in our great diversity, because the whole synodal process has shown the immense diversity of ways of living our faith, expressing our faith, of being church in the different parts of the world, that this is not a weakness, but that this is the strong richness of the church. And if we care for it and deal with it in the spirit of Jesus, that we do not diminish differences and diversity, but to learn with all what it sometimes takes, also sometimes the tensions, the really work in relationships you need to understand each other well, to appreciate each other being different, then also this is an important witness in our world where often to be different leads to polarization, leads to fragmentation. I also believe that when it is said the Catholic Church is not a democracy, because in a democracy everybody is equal in rights and in duties, I believe we need to be careful here. Yes, we have a church with a hierarchical structure, but that does not mean that we cannot include democratic elements which would be very helpful to live coherently our being church. And there I appreciate very much often the wise appreciations which a theologian, a German theologian who died a couple of years ago, Medard Kehl, said. He said, okay, the church is not a democracy, but the church, when we look at its history, has always incorporated structural elements analogous to monarchy and to aristocracy in its history. It need not, and so it needs not to be afraid to incorporate structural elements analogous to democracy. And, for example, elements corresponding to the legal culture in modern democracies. I believe also in a world where in many places, Peru is only one of the places, democracy is very much at stake right now, we need to be cautioned. To just only affirm church is not a democracy. But what are then gospel values which very well go with democracy and which also for our coherent living out of the gospel would be important to ask ourselves, how can we include them, being a hierarchical church, but on the way to become a synodal church, without destruction of hierarchies, but that if you have the hierarchical system, at least we begin to understand and practice authority in a different way. That will be the first step and a very important step. And I think good functioning democracies can also teach us something about when you have different outlooks, different visions, different opinions, how do you discern carefully and under conditions of equality, what decision would be best to take. I believe there is a step still open to discern further and then to take in what has been a very important starting point, to learn how to listen to each other. For me, this is essential to synodality, to listen to each other under equal conditions, that the word of each one counts, that we believe in our interactions, God's Spirit is working, but only by listening and not dealing with differences and sometimes deep differences. It comes also to important questions. Then disculpe, sometimes when it comes to important questions, theological differences, different ways of understanding what church is about to be, then I think we have to learn still more how to do this in a discerning way, not losing the attitude of listening to each other, but also being able to openly put the different arguments on the table, to weigh the arguments. But that also means the composition of commissions who deals with those questions needs to be transparently done. It needs to be clear who is representative of which group, and to also assure that when there are significant differences in arguments, in theological positions, that representatives from each groups are there in more or less the same number. That what are some, I think, very important and helpful criteria when you have to do discernment in academic contexts and discuss topics where there are different schools and different positions, in order to do it in a fair, transparent, and constructive way. This also should be something which should take place in our church and more in our church. I think Pope Francis opened a way for this, but I would desire that we do more steps in order to do it coherently and fruitfully. Like a last point, I also would desire that we think of equality equality of dignity, equality of rights to access life in dignity when it comes to care for our earth and when it comes to respecting basic human rights. Right now, and I feel this is something which has been present during the synodal process, yes, is also mentioned, but briefly in the document, in the final document. And at the same time, when we look at the seriousness of the state of our earth right now, and Amazon, very much so, only to say that short time ago, here, a new investigation was published. I know the researcher and his team. He is a very responsible man who since years is doing research about the Amazon and mining and extractive industries. And he has shown that in the Amazon regions, at several places, the point of no return, or the tipping point, is reached, which is a very serious situation. And it just assures the theory, the hypothesis, several researchers already put out some time ago. They said, we don't think that in the Amazon, the point of collapse will be like one big point of disaster, but it will be a point to build up. In many places, it will happen that the tipping point is reached and overstepped, and then you have a diminishment of biodiversity. Earth will become poorer and poorer, the ecosystems will be impoverished ever more, and then finally it turns out to have a big savanna instead of the Amazon rainforest. So when this is reality, and there are several other places in our world at stake, in the Amazon, you have also the fact that the indigenous peoples living it, it's their living space since centuries, it's their home. And they are not included often in decisions taken, what projects should happen there. So equality means here also a solidarity to side with peoples, with groups in our different places worldwide, whose voices should be included when it comes to what is today necessary to care for our earth. And because they are the ones who are the first ones to suffer the dreadful consequences and whose health and lives are at stake. In Peru, we are living it strongly right now. Many of our impoverished people are living in the areas where already the climate change has disastrous consequences. So working for equality of dignity and equality of rights, I believe it is part of our church witness today to also see in a synodal spirit how to work together in a more effective protection of our common home, so much in danger right now, and to be in solidarity with people who already are leaving and losing their homes now because of the dreadful impacts of climate change. In this sense, I would desire that our question for equality is a wholesome question, and that we contribute from our faith for the church, that we look at the signs where church is already moving, though sometimes slowly, but there is movement, there is, I believe, reason for hope, and that we as different communities also see like what you are doing, what people are doing in other places, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, Europe, that helps church to create ever more synodal culture. Church needs these groups. That is also in civil life. How did big cultural changes took place? Because there are groups who start to live something. I truly believe that Spirit is working through groups like your group is, like there are many other committed groups to synodality. The importance will be to connect more with each other, to perceive this as a common call where we help each other, sometimes also when there are disappointing experiences, to not give up. And it's like to be like the woman in the gospel who takes the little leaven she has and puts it into the flour. And God's Spirit takes care of that. This will then become the dough for making bread to nourish many others. And I believe that is our deep mission as a synodal church, and that we all can contribute to it, that it becomes more and more reality. And then to see also what it implies towards civil society, to whom more we can link when democracy is at stake and when our earth, our as common home, is at stake. There is also the dynamism which synodality allows for, to enter into alliances with people of goodwill in other religions, in civil society, to say that is a moment where we can live more fully what Jesus calls us to be a sacrament of God's love for the suffering humanity and the suffering earth calls for doing it together with many others. Thank you very much.
Birgit, on behalf of everyone who was here today, I would like to thank you very much for your willingness to tell us about your experiences, your insights, your motives for your work. We live in a reeling world. This is an expression by Paul Zulener, and you called it a fragmented world. So we need all the more hope that it will become more stable again and give people more stability. You know yourself that hope is a delicate plant and always needs support. It has to be watered again and again. You have done that today, combined with the call to be and become more attentive and active ourselves. We are very grateful to you for it. We wish you continued joy, enthusiasm, and above all, many blessings for your work. And of course, not only for your work, because hopefully your life doesn't just consist of work. And we wish you every success in everything you do, even if success is not necessarily a Christian word. But if you are successful in what you do, it will benefit for so many people and therefore for our entire church. Thank you very much, Birgit. And don't forget, you are a sign of hope for our church. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. I agree 100%. I am delighted that Birgit got up at 6 o'clock this morning to come and give us this inspiring talk here today and restore our faith in synodality. We finish as we do with the closing prayer. Over to Anne Dobbing, please. Anne.
God of us all, help us to recognise and use the gifts of all people as Jesus did. Help us to listen to each other. Help us to remain hopeful. Help us to be brave in speaking courageously in an environment of prayer and discernment. Bless our movement working towards synodality in our church for the benefit of the generations who will follow us. We give thanks today for the women and men who witness so powerfully and faithfully to the way of love and service that Jesus called us to. And we pray today for the wonderful work and vocation of Dr. Birgit Weiler. We ask that she may continue to be blessed and supported in the work she does to promote an environment of listening and mutual respect in all the communities where she works. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Please allow me also to give a heartfelt thank you to each one of us and to you as a community. You are for me a sign of hope, and being connected with you in more than one opportunity has also given me strength when things become a little tough and you have to practice resilience. So a deep felt thank you and many, many blessings also to each one of you, that you continue to be signs of synodality lived in this church and possible to live in this church, despite all the resistances we also have to face. Many, many blessings.
Many, many thanks, Birgit. Thank you so much. Can we do a round of applause? Please unmute.
Blessing also to you. Thank you so much.
Inspirational. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us here today. We will try to have the video of your talk up within the next day or two.